Hello, lovely listeners. Today I am talking to Dr. Carolina R., a powerhouse in tech research and an award winning activist and an incredible pole dancer. Carolina, hi, how are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this. I'm also very tired because I overdid my training early this morning and then my day has exploded on me with a bunch of meetings and things to do. So, surviving rather than thriving, but trying my best.
Well, I hope that this is not too stressful a part of your day. It sounds chaotic so far already.
It's chaotic, but this is one of the nicer things that I get to do. So, I'm excited.
That's nice. Do you want to introduce yourself to everyone? Tell them what you do, who you are.
Sure. I mean, you already did a great job with my introduction, so very kind. Thank you. I would define myself as a pole dancing academic. I kind of publicly join two identities because my research on social media censorship and in general online harms, the way people behave online, uh, blends with my life as a social media content creator, pole dance performer, and anti-censorship activist. You can find me online at bloggeronpole.com and as blogger on pole on all social media if I'm not shadow banned, which may mean that you will have to type my username in full.
You know, something that I really love about following you is that juxtaposition between you being this like incredibly smart, articulate researcher, and then you also dancing around in your pants. And I think it's because society tells us that women can only be one thing, right? Like it's that virgin and a whore dichotomy where you're only allowed to be one thing, and if you step outside the status quo, then you'll be punished for it. And seeing you do it anyway, I think is just really inspiring. Do you get a lot of backlash from academia for being a pole dancer?
So first of all, thank you for the compliments. Second of all, I mean, I wouldn't say that I get a backlash because I think academia is one of the more kind of flexible and open-minded workplaces that one can join. I would say though, what does tend to happen is that it then takes time for me to be hired, which is something that I faced when I was applying for my postdoc. It took me a year and a half to find one, and I was mainly supporting myself by teaching pole dance classes at the time because academia wasn't hiring me. And now I'm looking for permanent positions. So, as assistant professor, like something that isn't a fixed term contract. And even though I have a very extensive list of publications, I think, my impact in my field is proven and I'm quite known for what I do. I think I wonder how the fact that the positions in academia now are few and far between because the market is not great is blending with the fact that my ass is out on the internet and people are like, do we actually want her to teach our students? But I think, something said that I said when I decided to join my accounts was that there is this fake premise of impartiality in academia where as a researcher you always have to be an outsider looking in when you're studying things. And actually no one is an outsider to anything because there are plenty of studies that even though maybe they are done by someone that isn't an insider into a community, they are actually quite biased against that community or towards a specific belief. So I think actually being known to communities that, for instance, face censorship, which is what I research, is actually quite helpful because then I can ask questions based on experiences that those people have shared or that I have had. And that has allowed me to then reveal things through studies that if I didn't experience them myself, I wouldn't have been able to ask these questions. So I think it's a benefit rather than a hindrance. I wonder how long the job market will take to catch up with that. But, even just given, like, going back to your comment about like you're only allowed to do one thing or to be one thing, the more I am open about my different lives, the more I find people that are doing exactly the same in different fields. And it is quite heartwarming actually to hear those stories and to see that, we're not just one thing, and that probably was the same in the past. It's just that people weren't as open about it. And one really nice compliment that a fellow researcher who focuses on censorship and also has a background in performance and stuff like that told me is that she found that since I came out as a pole dancing academic, my performances have actually gotten dirtier than they were before. So I'm very happy with that, because I think with that comes a journey of, I want to express myself this way. It matters to me. And because I have an audience, I can also express why it matters to me, because I'm a sexual assault and domestic violence survivor. So, or rather abusive relationship, because we weren't really living together apart from a very brief time. And for ages, like I felt like I didn't really have control over my body, and sexuality was something that I was trying to shun because it came with bad memories and with triggers. And to be able to kind of reclaim ownership over all of that in my own way, in communities that feel really supportive, is really important to me. And I think it also shows that, again, we are not just one thing. Whatever happened to us doesn't define us. And yeah, it's important to show that you can be many things at once, and that doesn't make you any less professional.
I think it's really important, and I think what you said earlier about being in something that you're researching can be really useful. Like, you see a lot of research where people have no idea about the thing that they're talking about, and then they make a lot of like assumptions, and if they had actually experienced even a fraction of the thing that they were talking about, they'd be able to ask much better questions and come to much better conclusions. But without a better understanding, it's hard to even know what you're looking at when you're looking at the results of your research.
Yeah, and actually, I think this could be quite interesting to your audience. There is a specific study on pole fitness, which is a contested term because I think it's what some pole dancers use to say, "I'm not a stripper. I do this for sports." But there is a study by two researchers called Whitehead and Kurtz that I cite in a recent chapter that I've published in a book called Sex on Stage, which I actually really recommend to everyone. It's just come out. It's edited by Bloomsbury, and it does feature this kind of push and pull and conflict of like sexuality and intellect and various environments. Well, these researchers set out to prove that pole dancing was a more show-offy and sexualized activity than everything else. And to prove that, they signed up to 3 pole classes. And you follow me, but also you probably know other people that are pole dancers, and you can easily see that in 3 classes you don't really get to know anything about a community, about a culture, but also about the activity itself, because pole dancing is so physically challenging that in 3 classes you've probably just managed to do a spin. It takes ages to actually build the strength and even just the confidence to do it well. And just assuming that from the outside, when then all it takes is maybe to enter a gym to see how show-offy gym bros are, to see that actually prejudice about pole dancing and its origins in the strip club is probably what motivated this study.
The idea of going into something to prove that it's show-offy is so absurd to me, because I guess that's how people from the outside of all sorts of like fitness or marginalized community, how other people are like looking and being like, oh well, they're just being weird to make a scene. Like, if they're looking at the gays with the blue hair, they're like just trying to be something. It's like, all you're doing by making this premise is showing that you have no understanding of the thing that you're talking about. And actually, if you spent some time, more than three classes in a space, you'd probably be able to learn a lot more. Gosh, how silly.
Yeah, it's very silly. And I feel like now the environment is slightly changing, in the sense that actually there's a lot of researchers that are like, I am part of this community and therefore I am very interested in studying it. And I think we're seeing that more and more, not just with pole dancing, but with yoga, with a lot of disciplines where it's actual insiders that are interested in researching on this. But I think there are also researchers that are like, oh, there's this new trend and it's weird, let's talk about it. And I'm always quite cautious of doing that myself as a researcher. Like, when I spot an online trend, instead of just just jumping in. I just try to immerse myself a bit more because I am fully aware of how annoying it is to have an outsider coming into my community and telling us what we're about.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot actually in terms of CrossFit, because I've been working out of a CrossFit gym for a few years now, and at the beginning CrossFit can be really intimidating because CrossFitters are always naked. They're like in their short shorts and they're topless and they're very sweaty and they're making lots of noise and they're jumping around. And when you're not part of it, you're like, oh, it's a bit much. Why is everyone naked? And then you start doing it and you're like, I'm actually so warm in this greenhouse. I'm gonna take my shirt off so I don't melt. And then actually you're like, oh, that's all it was. People are just hot. People are just hot. Nobody's like trying to do anything. No one's trying to make you feel uncomfortable. They're just overheating. And you
Which is
don't realize
normal
that.
when you work out. Like, I don't know, it just feels like so intuitive. Yeah, these people are like doing really hard things and they're sweaty.
Yeah, people are just hot. And like I guess it's the same with pole, right? Like I've done a few pole classes just for fun, so I have very limited experience. But like the more naked you are, the easier it is to like grip onto the thing. And if you're wearing too many clothes, you're going to slide off the pole and then it's harder. So you may as well be in less clothes because then you can do the thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of people use the grip thing as the excuse as to why they need to wear very little clothing. And it's right. Like, don't get me wrong. This is 100% the reason. But the reason why that is because Paul was popularized by strippers, and obviously strippers would strip in very little clothing. So if you want to do the moves that strippers used to do, or that they still do, you need your skin to be out. And there is one particular move that is really challenging, and it's called the Titanic, where your butt crack is what's keeping you up the pole. So you need a thong to do that move. And don't get me wrong, now there are new technologies that make sure that you can wear grippy clothing like leggings and stuff, which have been lifesavers for instance, pole dancers that do not deny where pole comes from, but personally, culturally, or maybe because of their religion, they prefer modesty. So they have been really helpful in that case. And I sometimes wear them because it gets really, really cold in the UK in the winter. And I'm like, I really want to train, but I don't want to get naked today. But I think like the principle is just like live and let live. Like, the fact that pole is an art that comes from stripping makes it very sexy and hard at the same time. Why can't something physically hard and challenging and beautiful also be sexy at the same time? I find that really, I don't know, quite interesting about our society, about how as soon as something features nudity or sexuality, then it's automatically bad. And I've come up different prejudices with that even before I did pole, because I'm from Sardinia, which is one of the main islands in Italy. And so I grew up on the beach. I would wear a bikini like April to October. And so when I first came to the UK, a lot of my Facebook pictures back in the day were bikini pictures. And I remember like people in my student societies at universities joking like, oh, you're never going to get hired for that bikini picture. And I'm like, I'm literally just existing in a bikini on the beach. Like there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. And, you see that reflected then into pole with the added element of sexuality. I think people in general, particularly in Northern European countries, well, not Northern European, I would say UK countries, and also countries that have a history of Puritanism, are just very uncomfortable with bodies.
Have you found that the way social media platforms are moderating this content has changed over time?
Oh, 100%. I mean, what's been quite random and helpful in my research career is that I started observing censorship at the same, like at the time that it happened, essentially. Because when I was doing my PhD, I started my PhD in 2017, and around the second year, across 2018, 2019, the Trump government approved a law called FOSTA SESTA, which is an acronym. I won't spell the acronym, but it's regarding protecting victims of sex trafficking or preventing sex trafficking from happening on social media, which sounds like a great thing. The issue is that sex trafficking was already illegal. This law is an exception to Section 230 of the US Telecommunications Act. And according to this act, platforms were just intermediaries of communications. They weren't the creators or the editors of that. So they weren't liable for whatever was posted on them. And that is still the case, except for communications that facilitate sex trafficking. And because the law is so broad, it blends sex trafficking, which is a crime, with sex work, which is a job. So this is where all of my fellow online naked people, and particularly sex workers, were really crucial at this time, because they were the first that were affected by censorship and that started talking about it. As soon as I started seeing them saying, hey, like, we're being shadow banned, we're being censored, our accounts are being deleted, I started getting interested in this, because I, on the flip side, was looking at online abuse, conspiracy theories, misinformation in my PhD. And that stuff was being shared far and wide. Nobody was censoring that. And then slowly but surely, because obviously pole dance is sex work adjacent, and actually a lot of pole dancers are sex workers, and even if we're not, we mirror that aesthetic, we started being affected ourselves. And I vividly remember how before this law came into force, and before Instagram in particular started following it, I remember I had about 3,000 followers. I was wearing very little, and my videos would reach like 20, 30,000 people, because if you looked at the analytics, you could see it. And then as soon as this law came into force and Instagram started applying it, no matter what I wore, if I was dancing around the pole, my reach would be much diminished, to the point that now I have over 31,000 followers. And sometimes I get less engagement than I did back when I had 3,000. And sometimes I wear more and I get less engagement. So it's been interesting to watch it happen, because it's been getting worse and worse. And I've interviewed plenty of pole dancers who were really active before this law, and they said it was so nice and easy to grow back then. And I've interviewed pole dancers that have been coming up as instructors or performers after, and they're very aware that their opportunities might be completely diminished, as opposed to people like me who started before. So there's definitely been a trajectory of censorship that has been worsening. The sad thing is that as well, sex workers have been the canary in the coal mine, talking about censorship, saying, hey, like, this is happening to us, but this will extend onto everybody else. And already we've seen sex workers, and then pole dancers, and then sex educators, sex toy brands, lingerie brands, athletes being affected. And now that is being extended onto political speech at a really crucial political time for global crisis. So, you know, you should listen to naked people. Essentially, this is the bottom line.
I've definitely noticed it amongst my own videos, and then videos of people that I'm following. If I post about anything remotely political, that video bombs. It'll either completely bomb, or I'll just get thousands of comments from alt-right fascists being racist or homophobic in my comments. There's no middle. It's one or the other. Either nobody sees it, or only terrible people see it. And it's actually very annoying, and it makes me wonder if it's even worth posting online sometimes. Because if either it's nothing or it's hate, is it worth it? I don't know. It's something I think about a lot.
It's like, why are we here, right? Because as soon as you exit your positive community, this is what happens. Like, there have been times where I've been interviewed by bigger accounts than mine, and as soon as that happens and I exit my little positive bubble, then there's everybody calling me a slut and telling me I deserve to get raped. Or on TikTok, soon, like, either it's nothing, like, crickets. Like, on TikTok, I have nearly 400,000 followers, and sometimes my videos only reach 100 people. And then as soon as I go viral, there's the creeps. or as you said, like the fascists and stuff. So I'm just kind of like, this used to be a better place. It used to be nicer being here, and it just, yeah, it does feel like it's getting worse and worse.
Do you think the tech companies are doing this because they're like intentionally like sex is bad, or do you think they're doing it because they're not even really thinking about it and they're like, what, I'll just do whatever I'm told if it means I can make money?
I think there's a bit of both, in the sense that actually, when these companies started, I think they really rode the wave of freedom and what their platforms allowed people to do. I'm thinking, the Arab Spring, the Me Too movement, it all sounded great for their own PR, because they were depicting themselves as these really progressive companies that, again, enabled freedom, a very kind of exceptionalist US based sort of view, right? And initially, we were kind of aligned with that because it was helpful for us. We were finding people that we wouldn't have found before. We were making connections. We were building communities and building careers and jobs and entrepreneurship. I think what started happening is that then companies started feeling like their own freedoms and their own earnings were curtailed by governments' requests, and particularly progressive governments' requests to limit the harms. So you would find a lot of governments being like, well, you're going to have to spend more on content moderation. You're going to have to prevent the harms and whatever. And then conveniently, they started seeing that advertisers preferred more conservative content, while at the same time, more conservative governments gave them carte blanche to not do much. So interestingly, then these freedom fighters then were all at Trump's latest inauguration because they actively campaigned for him, or helped his content to reach more people. So I think it's been a trajectory. I think it's been a lack of care, and then an actual design, like an actual strategy brought by their economic interests.
You've spoken about people being deplatformed. What does that mean? What does that look like?
So being deplatformed essentially means being denied a platform. So you have an account, and then at the flick of a switch, the platform is like, bye, this account is removed. And if they do it correctly, you get a notification about it and an email or something, and you can appeal. But a lot of the time you don't. And I've actually interviewed a bunch of users who were deplatformed at the flick of a switch without receiving a notification, which is something that happened to me after posting a picture with my grandma on Instagram, which to this day, I don't know why that's the thing that triggered it, but that was the last thing I posted and my account was gone. And so a lot of the time you're not notified of that. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate that platforms have a really hard job in terms of preventing harm. So they would rather do something fast and then apologize later. But the issue is that this doesn't work because appeals don't work. Appeals are an afterthought on platforms, and a lot of people I've spoken to are either never given the chance to appeal, or when they do appeal, the appeals are glitchy and useless, which is why I find myself being an unofficial and unpaid intermediary between Meta and the platform users. And so a system that is so conservative needs a really functioning, thorough, and swift appeal system. And this is just not what we have.
When you were interviewing the deplatformed creators, did any of them get their platforms back, or is it gone, finished? You have to start working from the beginning?
It was a mix. Some did, and when they did, it was because they had acquaintances that either worked for Meta or could help them, kind of like I did, or maybe they made so much noise in the media because their profile was big that they got it back. But a lot of average users just don't get their profile back, and like that's like a loss of community, a loss of network, a loss of work opportunities and of connection. A user that I helped get their profile back said, "Thank you for helping me. That was the only place where I had pictures of my dead stepmother, and if you hadn't helped me, I would have lost them." So again, that's a huge emotional impact that deplatforming has.
Yeah, that would be really sad to lose those photos.
Yeah.
And I guess if people are finding work through these platforms and then suddenly the platform is gone, that's income gone with it.
That's income gone with it. And the mental health impact of that is wild, because imagine if you're just fired on the spot. That is basically what's happening. Like, I've had participants that have had to return money to brands, gifts to brands, but also in general, I've had participants who said that while from an account they earned, let's say, 8,000 a month because that was connected to their OnlyFans. As soon as they lost the account and they had to start from scratch, their earnings were not even halves. They were like half. They would be earning 3,000 as a result.
It's such a big hit. I think people don't really think about it that much because people are like, social media, whatever. But actually, for a lot of people, this is the main place where work exists. Everything used to be out there, but now really it's all in here.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
that's
ads
scary.
are there, so you promote your work through the ads, through which then people buy stuff. Your You promote yourself, so it's almost like a business card, and people can reach out to you for opportunities. So that's another thing that people said they lost, the opportunities to work. And just in general, like even the sales that you can make through social media are like through your direct profile are really important. So yeah, like social media is now work, as much as a personal thing, which I think is also why, and this is, I think, why last time you asked to speak to me, I think that's why people are tired of it. Because in my latest paper, which is essentially called Post Social Media and being published in a journal called Convergence, I co-wrote it with my boss, Professor Pam Briggs. People are saying how tired they are of social media, and they are tired because it's an aggressively salesy space that also has the promise of community. So they have to be always on. And sometimes there's this collapse of, oh my God, I've just come on to look at pictures of cats, but actually there's people that want something from me. Or, platforms are becoming so aggressively salesy where every other thing is an ad that people didn't ask to see, while their own content is being censored, that they're like, why am I even here? Like, most of the things that I'm interested in, I'm not seeing. So yeah, like I think like the economics of social media is really taking over.
Yeah, I think that's all really relatable. Social media has become more work than I think social, I guess. It used to be a place where you would find community, and you can still find community, I think. Like, it's still the best place to find community if you're a queer person, I think. But it's not the same as it was before. It is all a lot more aggressive, and you do feel like you're just swimming in an ocean of nonsense a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk on the enshittification of the internet. So basically, the internet just becoming a load of AI crap, or like harms and like things that are crowding the space and sucking in your time without giving anything back. And you're right, like you're for the amount of like goodness that you can claim back, there is actually a whole lot of nonsense. And it didn't used to be like this. It's gotten a lot worse. And like even personally, like I really envy my parents who would clock into work and then exit it, like this thing didn't follow them, while it's my job as a social media researcher and as a content creator, but also as someone who's on the job market, to be always on and to just know that like I know what trends are out there, that I'm not speaking out of turn because maybe I haven't paid attention to the latest scandal. And I always try to take breaks and to go offline, because it didn't used to be like this. We didn't have to be connected all the time. And it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It's really exhausting. How do you, or maybe if any of the creators you spoke to during your research, navigate the tension between being visible and trying to make money, but also trying to stay safe?
I mean, it's really, really tricky for a lot of creators. I have some privileges in the sense that, for instance, I'm cisgender and I'm white, even though I am queer and I am a woman. So some of the intersecting demographics that are hugely targeted right now, I'm not part of them. But at the same time, in terms of how I keep myself safe, is I try to access social media only once a day. so that I don't get sucked in, I don't get angry, I don't get upset. I try to get my news from reputable news sources as much as possible, as opposed to only using social media for those, because otherwise it does feel like you're being bombarded by things. And I try to shift all my meaningful conversations offline as much as possible. I also should say, in terms of safety, I always try to keep a backup. I always try to use two-factor authentication, and I always try to remember what it is that I posted last, because particularly when your account is at risk of censorship, what will happen is that platforms will ask you what you posted last, and they will tell you that you violated some community guidelines. So if you have an intermediary like me, then you can actually say, well, no, I didn't do that. Sometimes I try to protect my peace and just not get involved in fights, because as much as I see what J.K. Rowling posts, not because I follow her, but because she's everywhere, I'm just like, am I going to get involved? There's no point. Like, there have been times where I was trolled by anti-trans feminists or people because of an event I took part of where an aggression happened towards a trans speaker, and I spoke online about why the way the event was managed was wrong. And as a result, I was trolled for weeks. So don't get me wrong, I am not one to avoid stepping in when you can defend people, but sometimes, there used to be a time where I would get involved with everything. I would comment on why everything was wrong, and now I'm just like, actually, I can do so much more as a researcher instead of just wasting my time arguing with people on social media that are not going to change their minds.
Do you think the way that like people mobilize to troll people has an impact on people just self-censoring so they don't have to put up with the noise of the fascists?
100%. Yeah, a lot of people I know self-censor, and a lot of my participants self-censor, and they self-censor not because they're protecting themselves from the fascists, but they self-censor because they're protecting themselves from the platform as well. So there's this double silencing that is happening. But I would also argue that outrage drives views on social media. So some people are riding the wave in whichever faction, but actually then when you look at the changing of minds or the furthering of the debate, we're at a standstill. We're not going anywhere. We're in the same place. So a lot of people talk about echo chambers, but actually there's another theory which is called trench warfare, where people get more and more radicalized by fighting in their factions. So the way I see it is, I actually want to see what horrible people are writing, because it's important to me as a researcher to keep track of that, and also just to remember what the other side thinks. But am I going to start arguments with them? Not really, because they're not going to change their mind. I'm just going to expose myself to more harm. And also, it's just going to waste my time. I'm not paid to start arguments on the internet, so there's no point.
Do you think there's anything we can do about the trajectory that we're going in, with platforms silencing some voices but really exploding others?
So I think as a society, we need to be way more politically active. And I don't mean, again, posting your infographic on social media. I mean actually educating ourselves about how platforms work and what we can ask of governments to regulate them properly. Because I think a lot of people see an online harm and they're like, oh no, there is a boob online, and like, okay, let's target that. That must be bad for children and women. But actually they don't go below the surface level of, maybe a child has seen that, and then as a result a lot of things get censored. Instead, what people need to do is dig deep, understand why platforms act only according to their commercial interests, and ask governments to demand transparency from platforms instead of for them to ban boobs or whatever. Because if you play a game of whack-a-mole with whatever trendy harm is happening at the moment, you're not solving the main issue, which is platforms are acting in some sort of civic function because they do connect us, and a lot of politics and news are mediated through them, but they're not forced to be transparent. So a lot of work has to go into giving researchers access into how they operate so that we can scrutinize them. And there is a lot that is happening about that in the EU and in the UK in general as well. But we need more. We need citizens to really demand transparency and to stop falling for moral panics about this is happening on social media and it's bad, we should shut down social media. That is not the issue. The issue is that these companies act with impunity. And so we need to scrutinize them like any other company, like any other private company, like water companies, like TV, like everything.
So, what is a practical thing that the people listening right now could do that could make some sort of change? Who do they talk to? Who do they say what to?
Well, their MPs is a good start. And I think in general, MPs get a lot of requests. But I think what's a really good thing to do is to always keep an eye on changes in the law that are being floated about social media. And those are going to be in the news everywhere. And then it's good to read stuff from good charities like Glitch, which is really good when it comes to online harms, but also Amnesty, NGOs, stuff like that, to understand what is happening to specific content and why that affects people. And as a result, when you write to your MP, you can say that. Instead of writing, get children off social media, you can have tangible requests that are like, we don't know enough about how platforms operate. Make them be more transparent. And then once we have that transparency, once we know, we can start demanding for more things. But if we keep saying ban this and ban that and ban these people, the result of that is that there is this sort of and this is where my Italianness comes out, this sort of minestrone of like laws put together, and platforms and governments need to fight really hard to enforce them all together, but solutions are not going to be apparent and they're going to be conflicting, like we've seen with the American law that I mentioned before, that instead of protecting victims, it's actually caused censorship worldwide and is making actual trafficking victims more difficult to detect because they're going to be censored.
What would a platform look like that was more just and more fair and running better?
So there is a really good book by Ben Tarnoff, which is called Internet for the People. And what he argues in the book, the core argument is that for any internet platform to work, it must not be for profit. So I think a platform that is not for profit would be good. But that's kind of wishful thinking, I would say. But again, as soon as profit comes into the picture, that becomes an issue, because there are so many nice and well-meaning startups that are launching and they're like, we welcome everyone, we are happy with everyone, be yourself, be you, YOLO. And then as soon as they start to risk losing money because people don't want to invest because there is a certain demographic on that platform, or they need to invest more in content moderation and they don't want to, then they kick out users that they don't care about that much, i.e. sex workers, more often than not. And as a result, then they become like the big bad platforms. So I think we need to remove this idea that you can profit massively from connecting people, because I think that's what's driving it all.
Do you think that's possible under capitalism?
Not really. But then again, I think capitalism is in its flop era, so something's got to give.
Gosh, I hope so. People do keep saying that. I hope that it's true.
Yes.
Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with our listeners?
No, I just wanted to say that I am super grateful for this opportunity. I love this conversation because I felt like it started in a really kind of, I don't know, like personal way, and then it snowballed towards the extinction of capitalism. I love that for us.
I love that for us too. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope everyone enjoys listening to this. If you did enjoy it, please leave a little 5-star review. That is very helpful. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me. Bye.